When somebody brings up the word ninjutsu to you, what do you think of? Do you think of Rasengan or Chidori or Shadow Clones? And if you do think of any of those things, that's completely fine. But when I think of the word ninjutsu, what I think of is elemental releases. Now, of course, I guess technically Chidori is an elemental release, but we're moving on. And while there is 5 types of elemental releases, those being wind, rock, water, fire, and lightning, if we're all being entirely real with ourselves, when it really boils down to it, there's 2 elemental releases that are significantly cooler than all the rest. The first of which is Lightning Release, which we've already talked about on this page extensively. Most specifically in one of our recent videos where we broke down the top 10 strongest Lightning Release jutsus in Naruto. The second coolest, at least in my humble opinion, of the elemental releases is Fire Release. Now, unfortunately, both of those elemental releases are specific to Sasuke, so in both of these videos, we're talking a lot about Sasuke, but these are the trials and tribulations that I go through to bring you content. So much in the same way that I was gritting my teeth through the strongest lightning release video, I'm gonna be gritting my teeth through today's video. Because today, we're talking about the top 10 strongest fire jutsus in Naruto. God damn it, there's a lot of Uchihas on this list. But before we get to Nick's suffering, guys, please, for me, like this video, subscribe to the page, and hit that noti bell. And if you're feeling particularly generous today, go ahead and follow my other channel, The Weeb Commander, where instead of talking about the top 10 things from Naruto, I talk about the top 10 things from quite literally any other anime. I just finished the JJK manga, so JJK content dump incoming. And if you really like the sound of my voice, go ahead and follow my brand new podcast, where me and Danny Mata break down everything that happened in anime this week. But before we get into all that, guys, today we gotta talk about a brand new sponsor to the page, Raycon earbuds. I've been wanting to work with Raycon for a long time. I found Raycon earbuds years ago when I was on a weight loss journey. I was looking for headphones that would stay in my ears during runs and also deliver incredible sound. And I hated tangling with cords. And Raycon earbuds fixed all of those problems for me at an affordable price point. I was able to bump my workout music without worrying about my headphones dying, falling out, or being subpar quality, all at half the price of other premium earbuds. Meaning you don't even have to choose between Raycon's numerous products. You get 2 pairs for the price of one of the other guys. And listen, I have destroyed other earbuds because I sweat so much at the gym. But that was never the case with Raycon earbuds. These are the most durable, water and sweat resistant earbuds I've ever used. I've accidentally left them outside in the rain. I've dropped them in puddles. I've run them through the washing machine. I've worked out with them for years and never have they broken on me. And unlike with other brands, Raycons are available in a variety of different colors, like carbon black or electric blue or rose gold. Every Raycon product also comes with 3 customizable sound profiles, earbud tap functions, noise isolation, awareness mode, custom gel tips for a perfect in-ear fit, and 8 hours of battery time on a full charge. So what do you guys say? Are you ready to buy something small with a big impact? Click the link in my description or go to buyraycon.com/nchammer23 to get 15% off your order today. I mean, come on, look at the packaging on these. It's sleek, it's sexy, it fits in your pocket. And when I tell you that these things do not come out, I'm telling you, they do not come out. Doesn't matter how intense the workout is, nothing. I could shake like this for an hour straight, and these things are locked in. So, Fire Release. If we're being entirely real, it's probably the least useful elemental release out of all of them. Sure, there's big flashy fireball moves, but either people seem to tank every single one of them, or simply dodge them. Or if you're built different like Sakura, you just apply chakra to your hands and catch fireballs and throw them back at the sender. Fire Release in the Naruto universe operates a bit like rapid fire ki blasts in Dragon Ball. All it really does is make a giant smoke screen that your enemy is gonna walk out of unfazed. So Fire Release is so useless in the Naruto universe, why are we so obsessed with it? For the same reason that every single one of us chose Charmander in Gen 1. Fire's cool, and while this isn't necessarily true for every Fire Release jutsu, it is most definitely true for our first Fire Release jutsu, which would be none other than the Uchiha birthright of the Great Fireball technique. This is a technique that every single Uchiha ninja needs to be able to pull off before they're considered a fully fledged ninja of the Uchiha clan. And therefore, it's usually one of the first ninjutsus that any Uchiha worth their salt learns. We've seen almost every single Uchiha we've ever seen in the show either use this technique or some variation of it. However, this is an important time to note that I am going to be separating the Great Fireball technique away from its variations, because there are variations of the Great Fireball technique, specifically those used by Madara, that should not be in the 10 spot. So once again, I'd like to clarify that at number 10, we have the Great Fireball technique, not Majestic Destroyer Flame, not Susanoo Great Fireball technique, just Great Fireball technique. This technique was probably the first hand signs that some of you nerds learned. Quite honestly, I was right there with you. Me and my girlfriend's secret handshake is Sasuke using Naruto's hands for a fireball technique. Little fun fact, in part 1 of Naruto, the Great Fireball technique, I believe, was 8 hand signs. But by the time that Naruto and Sasuke are having their final battle, Sasuke has it down to 4. This is to show mastery over his hand signs and ability to mold chakra. Anyways, the Great Fireball technique is pulled off when an Uchiha clan's member figures out how to knead chakra in their mouth. And upon kneading their chakra and funneling it into flame release, they're able to spit out a fireball. Now, depending on your skill as a ninjutsu user, this fireball can have massive variations in size, with the high ends being the likes of Madara and Shisui, the latter of which Shisui had to use Anbu level water release in his mouth so he wouldn't burn the inside of his mouth because the fireball he was creating was so large and hot. And while the technique is called the Great Fireball technique, it's actually not always a ball. Many Uchiha, Sasuke included, have been showed using this technique as a kind of continuous flamethrower. And while this ability does look incredibly cool, like I stated, it's pretty much the Naruto version of multiple ki blasts, because either it doesn't hit or it does nothing, but it doesn't mean it's not powerful. There's a reason it's been a staple of the Uchiha clan for thousands of years. Ooh, this feels like a good time to include the fact that I will not be covering Kekkei Genkai in this list, so there won't be any Scorch release or Lava release, because that's kind of cheating. Got it, good. Coming up at number 9, we have Kakuzo's either intelligent hard work or searing migraine, depending on what you want to call it. I personally massively prefer searing migraine, but to each their own. Searing migraine is the fire release of Kakuzo's flame mask. This flame mask produces a relatively small fireball that it spits at opponents. The reason that I have this fireball over the Great Fireball technique is because what it does upon hitting the ground. See, this fireball upon hitting the ground or an opponent erupts into a giant firestorm, and this firestorm spreads in all directions, traveling along the ground. In essence, even if you dodge this relatively small and easy to dodge fireball, the massive scale destruction of the fireball's contact with anything is incredibly difficult to evade. Not to mention that this firestorm can be significantly amplified using Kakuzo's wind mask. Since we're not really touching on Kekkei Genkais, it would feel cheap to give this fireball the boost of the fact that it can be boosted using wind release. But just know when Searing Migraine is combined with the wind mask, it was basically able to evaporate a small pond in a matter of seconds, which is saying something when we consider the fact that fire jutsu is weak to water and water jutsu. But enough about jutsus used by Kakuzu, let's talk about jutsus used by somebody that Kakuzu helped kill, because coming up after Searing Migraine, we have Ash Pile Burning. Asuma for a long time has been one of my favorite characters, mostly because I own a couple of actual chakra blades I can't find, which is alarming, and because he was very easy for me to cosplay. So I always loved Asuma's iconic fire release move, Ash Pile Burning. The thing about this jutsu though is that the name is kind of misleading, because with a name like Ash Pile Burning, people assume that Asuma is spitting ash out of his mouth, which he's actually not. It's actually significantly more hardcore than that. See, Ash Pile Burning is a jutsu specific to the Sarutobi, who outside of the Uchiha are the strongest fire style users we know of. And this jutsu, which we've seen used by Asuma and Konohamaru, doesn't include spitting out ash, but instead gunpowder laced with chakra. Where do they keep the gunpowder? I don't know. Maybe they're in all the cigarettes Asuma's smoking, but then again, where's Konohamaru finding it? Also, gunpowder in a cigarette is basically how we tried to kill Castro. Regardless, the user of this jutsu spews out a massive cloud of chakra-infused gunpowder. And since this gunpowder is technically created out of ash, I know, it's confusing, it operates effectively like a smoke screen, making a giant cloud that fully envelops an enemy. And then once this cloud has both blinded and surrounded your enemy, the user of this jutsu clicks their teeth together. However, using this jutsu does require a little bit of preparation beforehand because they're not making a spark with their teeth. Users of this jutsu, specifically Sarutobis, place a flint in their teeth, and upon smashing that flint off their tooth, they create a spark that ignites the cloud. Now, this jutsu is incredibly cool and also very powerful. If Hidan wasn't immortal, it would have killed Hidan. There's also the added practicality of the fact that this jutsu does operate as a smokescreen, and also could potentially be used against a fire jutsu wielder to stop them from potentially using their most powerful jutsu. However, it is also kind of a double-edged sword, because it is just an explosion. And more than that, it's just a cloud of explosive materials. So before anybody uses this jutsu, they have to have an incredibly keen battle sense. They need to know if their allies are nearby. They need to know if the wind is gonna blow their explosive cloud back at them. And they need to know exactly when to ignite this cloud. So while I do love this jutsu, the fact that it is kind of a double-edged sword is putting it pretty low on the list here. Now to take an absolutely massive step forward in terms of power. Because coming in at number 7, we have a relatively unknown jutsu known as Caged Heat Arson Prison. It's a mouthful, I'm aware, but we've only ever seen this jutsu used once, and that was by Momoshiki Otsutsuki. And the way that it works is kind of awesome. Though it might technically be a Kikagenkai, I'll leave that up to you. See, the way that Caged Heat Arson Prison works is that Momoshiki controls rubble remote. That is to say that Momoshiki, with probably the power of Earth Release, controls rubble around him. He then, upon picking up this rubble, is able to control its direction with his fingers. However, since Momoshiki has complete control over this rubble, he's also able to increase the density of the rubble. So as he's controlling these rocks to head at his opponents, he's also increasing their density to a point where they heat up, effectively liquefying these rocks. But you know what happens when you liquefy rocks? You get lava of sorts. This causes these liquefied rocks to cling to Momoshiki's opponents upon contact, which naturally causes pretty severe burns. However, Momoshiki, by clenching his fist, can explode these pieces of rubble into a fiery explosion. An explosion that was so powerful that it destroyed Sasuke's Susanoo. So is this fire release? Is it earth release? Is it lava release? I don't really know. All I know is that when he clenched his fist, a big fireball happened, and that fireball was able to destroy a Susanoo, specifically that of Sasuke. And this was adult Sasuke, so that Susanoo is nothing to scoff at. So was that placement cheating? I don't know, it's my video. But you know what is most definitely a fire release jutsu? Our next entry on this list. Because coming in at number 6, we have Blast Wave Wild Dance. Now, technically this is kind of a variation of the Great Fireball technique, and we've seen it used in 2 separate ways. See, this jutsu has only ever been used by Obito. In the beginning of the jutsu looks a lot like a Great Fireball technique. The user of this technique needs the chakra in their body and funnels it into their mouth. They then expel that fire from their mouth, but not before they do something else. And that something else is one of 2 things. But both of those things are to achieve the same thing. Basically, in order to pull off Blast Wave Wild Dance, you have to spiralize your fireball, making a fiery vortex that whoever you're spewing this flame at cannot escape. Essentially, this technique was created in order to make the Great Fireball technique more versatile and more of a guaranteed kill kind of situation. It's supposed to surround you and cut off your options while effectively burning you to death. The way that this fire is spiralized is through one of the 2 methods we were talking about. The first of which is the user pulling in a ton of oxygen into their chest. And as this oxygen is pulled into the user's chest, the fire they've created by needing their chakra is spiralized. The second way that this fire is spiralized is through the use of the Kamui. For those of you who don't remember exactly what it looks like for Obito to use Kamui, every time he warps his body away, it appears as though his body is twisting. So Obito, while spewing out this fire, uses a light version of the Kamui to spiralize the chakra that's coming out of him. It's never explicitly stated which of these 2 versions is stronger, but it's implied because Obito started using Kamui later in his life that the Kamui version is probably stronger. And when we take into account that the later version requires the use of quite possibly the strongest Mangekyo Sharingan ability in the show, well, it's hard to argue with that one being strong. Which also makes sense when we consider the fact that in order to counter this jutsu, Naruto had to activate Jin Cloak level 2 and blast it away with his Kurama tails. But without Naruto and Kurama's chakra, it's a possibility that this jutsu would have wiped out a large part of the Shinobi Alliance. But since we're talking about people who are dead's jutsus, we might as well talk about another person who is no longer with us in our number 5 spot, Toad Oil Flame Bullets. Now, this is kind of a shared spot because there's a couple of different moves that have Toad Oil being lit on fire, most specifically Sage Art Goemon. So I'm gonna treat this spot like it's 2 spots, but it's actually just 1 spot. Treat it like it's 2 spots in that I'm gonna describe both of those jutsus. Starting with Toad Oil Flame Bullets. This jutsu is a cooperation jutsu, specifically between Toad Sages and their respective toads. Usually this cooperation jutsu is done with a larger toad like Gamabunta, because larger toads have larger lung capacities. Why do these toads need large lung capacities? Well, because they need to be able to spew as much toad oil as possible. And that requires them to take a large breath in, and I guess much like how Asuma was hiding gunpowder inside of himself for 30 or so years, Gamabunta finds oil in himself to spit out. Unfortunately, the size of the toad isn't the only important thing when using this jutsu. There also has to be harmonization between the toad sage and the respective toad, as they need to understand not only where they both need to aim, but when to fire. And should the toad sage and the toad be in harmonization, they make one of the biggest sources of fire in Naruto's entire universe. It's like if Uchiha was using the Great Fireball technique in the flamethrower transformation while they were also 100 feet tall, which they can do. We'll talk about it in a little bit, but we're not there yet. Unfortunately, we haven't seen that much usage of this jutsu. We know that when it was used against Manda, it was so powerful that Manda had to shed his skin to escape. And we know that when Naruto used it with two significantly smaller toads than Gamabunta, that it was enough to not only stun, but also seriously injure Isobe. Now, the strength of this jutsu could be for a myriad of reasons, but what I boil it down to is either the sheer amount of flames or the temperature at which toad oil burns. And as we've seen this jutsu injure some of the most powerful summons and tailed beasts, it's hard to say that it's not one of the most powerful fire jutsus in Naruto. Now on to Sage Art Goemon. This technique could technically be cheating, as this technique is not only a cooperation technique between a toad sage and one toad, but two. Specifically, this is a cooperation technique between Jiraiya and Ma and Pa. The reason this technique might be cheating is because it requires both wind and fire release. In order to pull this jutsu off, Jiraiya makes an insane amount of toad oil, like an Olympic pool of toad oil. I don't know where he's putting it. And Ma simultaneously releases fire release, while Pa simultaneously releases wind release. The combination of these three very powerful attacks covers an entire battlefield in hot, burning, vortexing oil. It said that using this technique causes the toad oil to burn at thousands of degrees, such that anybody who gets caught in it within a matter of seconds would be burned to cinders. Unfortunately, one of the paths of pain kind of just absorbs it, but it had a ton of promise. Basically, if you're indoors and not able to absorb ninjutsu, Jiraiya using this technique will kill you. But since we're talking about Jiraiya, let's talk about his logical successor, Kashin Koji. See, Kashin Koji is a clone of Jiraiya and is, for all intents and purposes, stronger. Outside of the fact that he is a shinobi wear cyborg, is a clone augmented with shinobi wear. He is also a perfect toad sage, while Jiraiya was an imperfect toad sage. I just realized that Jiraiya trained not one, but two perfect toad sages in Minato and Naruto. That must have been very aggravating. Like, at what point do you start asking your students for pointers? But Kashin Koji goes beyond Jiraiya in more things than just toad sagedom, because Kashin Koji has a fire jutsu ability called the True Fire of Samadhi. And this technique, for all intents and purposes, is Amaterasu. What do I mean by that? Well, the True Fire of Samadhi is activated when Kashin Koji puts an opponent in physical contact with a marked object. Now, that marked object can be honestly anything. The two objects that we've seen Kashin Koji use, or at least reference to, were kunais or small toads. Once either this kunai or small toad comes into contact with one of Kashin Koji's enemies, they burst into flames. And not regular extinguishable flames, no, that would be way too easy. These flames are regarded to as the flames of purgatory and are said to be inextinguishable by either rain or wind. On top of the fact that they're inextinguishable through regular means, they also burn so hot and so quickly that they outpace regenerative abilities. Which regenerative abilities? Well, at least the regenerative abilities of Victor. But the fact that it's so ambiguous as to just say regenerative abilities implies that these flames could outburn regenerative abilities like Hashirama's or Sakura's or Tsunade's, which, if true, is terrifying. Now, truly the only weakness to these flames is just like the weakness of Jiraiya's last ability. It's if you can absorb ninjutsu, as these flames like toad oil bullets and all of that are ninjutsu. But Kashin Koji has an answer for that as well, because Kashin Koji is also able to summon just actual flames. See, Kashin Koji has a contract with the Flaming Mountain. It allows him to, when placing a summoning seal, to summon these real flames from a mountain that is continually on fire to his location. And it was with these fires that Kashin Koji was able to burn Jigen's vessel, because Jigen wasn't able to absorb the flames. Considering the fact that those are just quite literally flames, I'm not gonna put them that high on the list. We're just talking about the True Fire of Samadhi, which, once again, was able to kill the likes of Victor, who was an inner of Kara and also consumed a chakra fruit of some degree. Coming up after the Amaterasu ripoff, we have, in the number 3 spot, Amaterasu.
Nick, you don't have Amaterasu in the 1 spot? What are you doing?
Yes, Amaterasu has quite literally been referred to as the highest level of fire release. And for all intents and purposes, it is. It is a projectable fire that, if it hits an opponent, will burn them to death. It doesn't matter the amount of wind, water, or slapping you do to that flame, it's gonna be the end of you. It was the reason that the fourth Raikage had to cut off his own arm. However, as far as Amaterasu goes, that's basically the only time it's ever been useful. And I'm talking just Amaterasu. I'm not talking Kagutsuchi. You're gonna have to wait for that one. I know I'm giving away future spots here. See, this technique is used by both Itachi and Sasuke. And if I'm being entirely real, the uselessness of Amaterasu is more to Itachi's blame than Sasuke's. But also, that's not entirely Itachi's fault. See, the way that Amaterasu works is that it fires directly at whatever the user is looking at. So if I was, with my Amaterasu eye, looking directly in the lens of my camera, my Amaterasu would shoot directly at the lens of my camera. And the travel time of Amaterasu is almost immediate, being nigh impossible to dodge, which is why it's so hard to believe it wasn't more effective. We've seen Itachi use Amaterasu in his battle against Sasuke and Jiraiya and Yakura, and all three of those people survived the experience. Now, could you make the argument that Itachi wasn't trying to kill any of these three people? Probably. Well, actually, no, he was absolutely definitely trying to kill Yakura. And he covers Yakura in Amaterasu flames, but Itachi runs out of chakra before it can finish off Yakura. Also, Yakura has some immunity to the Amaterasu at the moment because he's in his version 2 transformed Jinchuriki state. But even when Itachi was truly trying to use Amaterasu on people to kill them, like in his battle against Nagato, Nagato, with the power of Almighty Push, was able to just push off Amaterasu. Killer Bee, when hit with Amaterasu, was simply able to leave an ink clone behind and swim away. Gaara was able to shirk off Amaterasu with his chakra-infused sand. Naruto was able to shirk off Amaterasu with his Jin cloak. On top of that, the fires of Amaterasu spread relatively slowly. So if hypothetically, let's say a cloak is hit with Amaterasu, you can simply take it off. Or if an arm's hit, like with the fourth Raikage, you can cut it off. On top of that, space-time ninjutsu, like the one that Kaguya wields, or Kamui, can be used to seal away the flames of Amaterasu. Not to mention that Sukuna Hikona, the dojutsu that Ishiki wields, could be used to shrink it because it's a ninjutsu. So, am I saying a lot of negative things about Amaterasu? Absolutely. But is it still very, very powerful? Yes. Amaterasu was able to burn through the Toad's Belly jutsu that Jiraiya was using to capture Kisame and Itachi. The Toad's Belly, which was said to be inescapable. Amaterasu was also able to burn through anything on Earth, being said to burn as hot as the sun. Amaterasu is so hot it can burn other flames, leaving those flames as nothing more than ashes. It's said that Amaterasu are the flames from hell, and it is a terrifyingly powerful jutsu. The idea of being caught with a fire that will burn you to ashes, and the only way to get out of it is for the caster to turn it off, is scary. But when it comes down to it, there's not only better versions of Amaterasu, like Kagutsuchi, there's also just stronger fire releases. So for all of those reasons, I'm putting Amaterasu at number 3. Coming up in the number 2 spot, we have a different application of Amaterasu, Kagutsuchi. Specifically, Blaze Release Kagutsuchi. And here's the thing, this could have been a Kagutsuchi list. If I wanted to, entries 5 through 2 could have just been different variations of Kagutsuchi. But 1, that's boring, and 2, that's a lot of talking about Sasuke. So we're gonna press Kagutsuchi down into 1 spot, and that spot is the number 2 spot. See, unlike Itachi, Sasuke's other Mangekyo Sharingan ability isn't Tsukiyomi, it's Kagutsuchi, which allows Sasuke to give physical shape to his Amaterasu. While Itachi kind of just blows black flames in a general direction, Sasuke is able to give it shape and form and apply it to things. And he does all of those things. Let's go quickly through the different variations of Kagutsuchi that could have comprised this entire fun list. There is Blaze Release Hanoi Kazuchi. This is a somewhat defensive / offensive ability used by Sasuke, where Sasuke surrounds himself in Blaze Release and shoots spikes of Blaze Release in all directions around him. These spike-shaped flames are meant to kill anybody around him and also block any incoming projectiles. So this defensive attack not only keeps Sasuke safe from anybody around him, but also kills anybody around him. And it's more than just simple penetration with the flame, these are also Amaterasu Black Flame, implying that anybody hit with this ability not only has to deal with a new burn hole in their chest, but also the Amaterasu Black Flames growing from it. Not to mention that Sasuke is not only able to apply Amaterasu to his sword, he's also able to create swords out of Amaterasu. And considering the fact that Amaterasu sticks to anything, not just people, going up against the guy who's holding a sword that will burn your sword to ash if it touches your sword is a bit of a problem, so best to dodge. But it's a bit hard to dodge considering the fact that he can also do this while in his Susanoo. But since we're talking about his Susanoo, we should talk about his Susanoo. When Sasuke is using the ribcage state of his Susanoo, he can cover his ribcage in Kagutsuchi, which means not only could you probably not break through his ribcage in the first place, if you try, you will be lit on fire. However, when Sasuke creates a fully formed Susanoo, he can either apply his Amaterasu to his arrows, because he has a bow, or create Yasaka beads created out of Amaterasu that he can throw at enemies. So yeah, having the ability to manipulate Amaterasu in any way possible is terrifying, which is why Kagutsuchi as a whole is getting our 2 spot.
But Nick, if Amaterasu and Kagutsuchi are already done, what could possibly be number 1?
Well, remember when I said we were going to talk about Madara at some point on this list? Yeah, we're doing it now. But much in the same way that I could have made a list of all the different variations of fireball jutsu that Madara used and made it the top 3 spots, once again, jamming things together. The biggest thing we're going to be talking about is Great Fire Annihilation, also known as Majestic Destroyer Flame. This jutsu has been referred to as the pinnacle of Uchiha Fire Jutsu. And this jutsu, for all intents and purposes, is a variation of the Great Fireball technique, but to a level at which it's not recognizable. See, in order to pull off this technique, Madara does all the things a basic Uchiha member would do to pull off Great Fireball technique. However, Madara has so much chakra that when using this technique, instead of a fireball, comes out a literal ocean of flame. It took a platoon of water jutsu users to nullify this one attack. And mind you, flame release is weak to water release. So it took almost all of the water jutsu users from the 4th division to nullify a fire attack using the stronger element in this reaction. And hypothetically, if those water jutsu users hadn't gotten to the front to nullify that attack, it would have killed the entire 4th division. 20,000 people gone. Not to mention the fact that Madara is still able to use this ability while in his Susanoo, except in that case, it gains the name Great Fire Destruction. And lastly, but definitely not least, we have Great Flame Flower, where Madara is able to spit dozens of massive fireballs that cover entire battlefields at once. And these fireballs are so large and burn so hot that they're able to not only destroy Earth release, but also water release. And if we're being entirely real, it was the power of this flame release from Madara that wiped out the 4th division. But who knows, maybe I'm just being biased and not giving Sasuke the number 1 spot as I tend to do. What do you guys think is the strongest fire jutsu in Naruto? Tell me in the comments below. And while you guys are down there, please, for me, like this video, subscribe to the page, and hit that noti bell. Listen, the irony of talking about fire jutsus while wearing an Avatar shirt is not lost on me.